there is a 50-30-20 framework. So the 50% says it's for your needs, the 30% is for your wants, and then 20% is towards your savings or investing or paying down the debt. Of today is that a steward prepares in season for the needs of the next. If you look at the entire passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it will list down every activity that is appointed for using a season. And when I was Hello, stewards. Welcome back to another episode of Bolts and Nuts of Financial Wellness. I am Ruth Kirago, and as always, thank you for joining me on this channel. This is where we learn together, we also build together, and we become better stewards of what has been entrusted to us. Before we begin today's conversation, kindly please like, comment, and subscribe and share. Now let's get into today's conversation. First, I will start with, I will call this episode Reclaim Your 20%. And this week's word is season. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, verse 1, and I will read it here. Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1 says, "To everything there is a season. And it is a time for every purpose under heaven." So to everything, there is a season. And it is a time for every purpose under heaven. And when I was reflecting on season, I was able to see that life moves in season. You know, there are some seasons that feel light. There are some seasons that we feel responsibilities has increased. There are some seasons that we build. There are some seasons that we are harvesting. And if you look at the entire passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, it will list down every activity that is appointed for using a season. And when I was reflecting on the seasons when it comes to the financial wellness, I realized as well, there are seasons with our finances. There are seasons in how we get those finances. There are times that one is in school, and when you're in school, the finances are not as much. The finances are limited because you're trading your time with the time that you're in class or you're studying. And so therefore, one is always eager to finish that season so that they can start working. And so you will find that in that season, the finances are low. But there comes a time that you start working, and of course, your finances increase. So there are seasons where you find income is high. There are also seasons that you find expenses are low. You know, overtime is available, bonuses are available. Then there comes a time when you get married and you have children, expenses become high. And because there is daycare that begins, there is medical bills that will appear, there is children have to go to school, there's school fees that has to be paid. Then there comes a times where you start to slow down in life, and now you're looking at retirement, and retirement comes. And at in this season, most of the time, employment is not, you're not employed. You're retired, and so therefore there is no money coming in through employment. And it is good for us stewards to prepare for the changing seasons. And the principle that I want us to reflect on today is that a steward prepares in season for the needs of the next. I reviewed a story in the book of Genesis chapter 41. And this is a story where Pharaoh was the king or the president in today's term of the land. And Pharaoh dreamt, and the first dream that he had, that he saw 7 fat cows. Then there came a time that there were 7 thin cows and ugly cows that came and ate the healthy ones. He woke up and he dreamt again. And this time he dreamt of grains, where there were grains that were, the harvest were big. or the harvest was plenty with the grains. Then there came a time that there were now 7 unhealthy grains that were scorched by the east of the wind. And so he was looking to see who will interpret this dream. And Joseph, at this particular time, he was in prison. So he was called. First of all, he was groomed because he had been in prison. So, of course, his appearance wasn't that good. So they shaved him, and he was given a new clothing. He was given a robe. He was prepared for the king so that he can meet Pharaoh. And then Pharaoh asked him, I have had this dream. Nobody has been able to interpret it. And so I'm hoping that you're going to interpret it for me today. And so Joseph says, in fact, those 2 dreams, they mean the same. You know, the 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grains, they mean the same. And that 7 means 7 years. And he went on to say that there are 7 years that are coming, that there will be plenty in this land. And then thereafter, famine will follow, and it will be there for 7 years. So we will have famine for 7 years. And so he said, you will need to look for a man who can discern and a wise man to be able to plan out a strategy for what needs to happen in the 7 years of plenty. And so they looked around, and Pharaoh said, the fact that you have already interpreted a dream, I will give you that work. And Joseph was able to come up with a strategy. And he said, for 7 years, we are going to collect 1/5 of the produce for the entire country. So whether it is regions, in this case, whether it is the different states, in places like Kenya, the different cities, that we will collect 1/5. And once we collect 1/5, we are going to store. It is not for eating today. It is not for us to consume today, but it is for us to keep. Because in 7 more years to come, the 7 years that will follow the 7 years of plenty, famine is coming. And so I looked at that story, and I was able to see that in the lifespan of a man, there is a time that is limited where any person has the strength, you have the capacity, you at an age where you're working and you are earning money, right? And there comes a times that retirement comes in. And it's not to say that after retirement, you are in a space of famine, not really. But it is a time for you to slow down, a time for you that you're not active anymore in the marketplace. So when I was thinking about that and reflecting on it, it showed me that how we need to also have the strategy of putting aside 1/5 of the money that we make. And 1/5 is equivalent to 20%. And interestingly, the many modern budgeting frameworks also recommend us saving 20%. There is a 50-30-20 framework. So the 50% says it's for your needs, the 30% is for your wants, and then 20% is towards your savings or investing or paying down the debt. And so that's an interesting realization of something that I was able to see. That in Israel, so many years ago, there was a principle and a strategy that was used, putting aside 20% to reserve. And here we find in the modern budgeting frameworks that 20% is what is recommended. This doesn't say that everybody must save 20%. But we have to look at it as, in order for us to still shine, to still eat of our plenty years when we are working, when we are young, when we have the capacity, we need to put some money as reserve. And in this case, it is investing so that that money can work for us. And so I'm saying I am reclaiming my 20%. And this is not because somebody told me. This is just because I want to be intentional. I have put aside 7 years to be focus and be intentional, because there is what I want to build in those 7 years. And one of the things that I made a decision is I want to document this, because I am learning every day. I am finding myself listening to podcasts, watching YouTube about money. And I believe where we focus, energy flows. And because I have been focusing on what will I teach the next episode? What am I learning this week? There's a lot that I'm learning. There's a lot that I'm finding myself that it's becoming second to nature. And therefore, as I discuss about seasons, Joseph said, look for a man who is discerning and wise. We ought to be, in our own lives and the lifespan that we have, we ought to be wise and discerning. And in the same book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 10, verse 10, and I'm going to read it. Ecclesiastes 10, verse 10 says, if an axe is dull and one does not sharpen it, if an axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. So if I'm using a skill that I've not sharpened, a skill that I've not learned, a skill that I've not spent time to understand, to articulate, to internalize what I'm learning, that's just like using a dull axe. And if I use a dull axe, then I'm going to use more strength. So in this case, if I don't sharpen my skill, whether it's about saving, whether it's about budgeting, whether it is about investing, what to invest in, about finances in general, that means I will use so much strength. While if I build with wisdom, success will be accomplished very quickly. So it is a challenge that I put out here as well, that be wise, sharpen that skill. When it comes to financial wellness, it is a skill. Investing or saving, it is not for the wealthy. It is not for the professors. It is not for those who have attained a PhD. It is for everyone. Because when we reflect what Joseph said or did, they were to collect a fifth of the produce from the entire country. There's a farmer who would only produce probably 10 tons. There's another farmer who would have 5,000 tons. But out of whether they were producing less or producing more, a fifth is what they needed to take to the government. So this is a challenge that sharpened the skill of getting to know how you spend your money, what your vision it is about money, where you see yourself in the next 10 years, the next 20 years. Planning out, when do I plan to retire? Planning out. But as we continue planning out and learning and seeking information about money and financial wellness, may we be found reclaiming 20%. That no matter what, from just out of school and I've just started my career, put 20%. Let it start to go straight to an investment account. Automate 20%. Before you allocate the 50% for your needs, the 30% for your wants, automate the 20% to go into that vehicle that is building more money or that is working for you. So this is why I'm reclaiming my 20%. Because I want to find myself in 7 years that I will look back and say, in 7 years, I was able to buy back my time by this much. And we will see, at the end of the 7 years, we will see how much time I'll have bought back. So every season has different responsibilities, but every season has an opportunity. And the question is the question is not how much I make. The question is, what is this season making possible? In this season, what am I able to put aside? Let the goal be 20%. But again, because there are seasons where you have different responsibilities, probably that 20% will not be enough. There are other seasons whereby the expenses are so low, and 20%, you will find yourself pushing it to 30 or 40%. So take advantage of every season, but commit to yourself that there is a minimum of 20% that you're putting down. There is a 20% that you're putting it into a vehicle that's growing. So ask yourself, what can I set aside today for my future self that will thank me for? A steward does not consume every harvest. A steward keeps a portion in reserve for the season that is still to come. And so as I continue this 7-year journey towards financial independence, one of my commitment is this, to recognize the season that I'm in. And this is for me to prepare intentionally for the season that is coming. And so thank you for joining me and for being a true steward. Thanks once again for spending time with me. Until the next time, this is where we learn together, we build together, and let's become better stewards of what has been entrusted to us. I am Ruth Kirago, and I will see you in the next episode. Toodles!